Hello, Garland Nixon here. It's Monday morning. We're hanging out with Laith Marouf. Lots of things to discuss. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here.
Everyone. Welcome back to the channel.
Hold on a second. All right, there we go. I don't know what the heck was going on. Chrome's always popping some up, advertising or something up. At any rate, all right, we're hanging out with Laith Marouf. And the most important thing before we get going, I gotta have Free Palestine.video up just before we get going, so you'll know Laith's site. We're going to talk about this later, of course, but for those of you who don't know, this is Laith's site, freepalestine.video. That's freepalestine.video. Lots of good stuff going on there, everything that's going on in the region. And of course, you can donate to Free Palestine TV right there. You see the donate button. We'll talk about that a little bit later. We're going to get going. Laith Marouf. Okay, let's start here. Oh, there's so much to go on. Here's where we'll start. The ceasefire. The last I heard, Israel was still bombing. They cooked up some lie. Apparently, a bulldozer or something ran over an old unexploded ordnance. They then used that as an excuse. Oh, great. Let's go bomb some more and kill more people, because that's all they want to do anyway. They bombed and killed more people. And apparently it came out that it was all a fraud, as always. They were lying, as always. Apparently, my other understanding is they're still in starvation mode, not allowing food through to starving people. What the hell kind of ceasefire is this, Laith Marouf?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a few incidents there, but more details about that bulldozer exploding is that the two people on the bulldozer are not actually Israeli soldiers. These are fascist, extremist, settler colonists from the West Bank that are volunteering to drive bulldozers and to level homes in Gaza. This is the area that is supposed to be, there's supposed to be a ceasefire. And what the Israelis are doing is they're destroying anything that's still standing that they can reach. And so these garbage bags, Zionist settlers from the West Bank volunteering to destroy other people's homes, got what they deserve. Comeuppance, an unexploded, device that the Israelis dropped a bomb and was under the rubble, and it exploded with them. They deserve everything that they got. And the reason that Netanyahu immediately, instilled this bombardment and killing of civilians is because the extremist settlers from the West Bank, and it's an oxymoron, all the colonists are extremists, were demonstrating and on Twitter and social media calling for blood for their own losses with their own weapons. And Netanyahu was, obliged, and he delivered on what these colonists want. In terms of us thinking about this ceasefire, I know it's hard for most of those who are watching to understand the reality, because there's so much propaganda out there. And maybe let's distill this out of the people's minds so we can correctly analyze what's happening. What happened on October 7th is a dramatic event that will be marked in history, not only of the 21st century, but as in history of resistance to occupation since the beginning of time. A besieged population was able to re-enter its occupied land, 1948 territories, and take over 12 Israeli bases, capture the 12 Israeli generals or kill them, and survived 2 years of combined military force of the Western Empire, and beyond that, destroyed completely 100 years of propaganda buildup that the West instilled in the whole world's population, not only about the issue of Palestine, but the issue of human rights, international law, women's rights, children's rights, what have you. All of that.
And you got to add, and destroyed the use of the Holocaust as a weapon of propaganda to allow Zionism to commit their own Holocaust and atrocities. That's been destroyed too. Go ahead.
You are 100% correct. And what does this mean? This is like the most significant military victory of an oppressed people in recorded history. There's, you cannot, the Zionists lost the war. The Palestinians didn't win. See? But the Zionists lost the war. Yes, the Palestinians didn't win. But if the Zionists lost the war. And it's such a huge victory. The ramifications of this battle since October 7th are playing out in the streets of the West. I mean, think about it. Gaza broke MAGA. Gaza created a schism and a breach and a revolution inside MAGA. MAGA is beating himself now. Gaza is what caused that.
And inside the Democratic Party, destroyed the Democratic Party, completely caused the Democratic leadership to cause them to lose an election and to absolutely obliterate any unity they had. They're showing videos now. Jimmy Dore had a video where they're asking, different members of the Democratic Party about Gaza, and they're just mumbling and bump. They don't know what to say. It's Benjamin Netanyahu, a war criminal. They're flabbergasted. The Democratic Party has been blown to pieces by this. Both parties. So the empire.
Oh yes, and definitely they committed suicide, the Democrats, in the last election. They knew they were losing if they didn't change the course, and they committed suicide. Okay, so the victory of Gaza is so enormous. Sometimes it's hard for us to realize the effects. The effects of the battle in Gaza can be detailed in the little micro of every state on this planet and the wider macro on regional and international scope and the course of history. So we're playing right now in the lost time. Okay, Netanyahu is grasping for a way to still survive. Although, I don't believe that there's not much difference between Netanyahu and Trump, but truly, we had this Witkoff and Kushner speak over the last 2 days, saying that they had a fight with Netanyahu, and that they were betrayed, and that the attack on Qatar, and that Trump called Netanyahu and said, "You're going to stop the war right now, because you're going to cause me to have a civil war inside the United States." So while the West and Netanyahu and Israel are bragging, claiming that this is a victory, truth of the matter, this war is not over yet. The specific battle of whatever, Gideon's chariots or so forth, stopped. But this war, starting October 7th, was an existential war. There's only one outcome here at the end of this. Either the Zionist colony ceases to exist, or there will be a total Holocaust of all, not the Palestinians, all the Arabs and Muslims, and a world war. Okay? So we're not finished yet. this is a, decreasing of the immediate battle in Gaza, but the war is not over yet. Don't fool yourself, anyone that's watching this. The war could at any moment restart in Lebanon or in Yemen or in Iran and spill out to a full regional and maybe world war. Depends on where the US decides to go, if Trump actually will commit suicide like the Democrats did. Okay? And how fast things are moving. And one last thing I want to say before, because I know I ranted there.
No, good.
There was a lot of talk October 8th, October 10th, whatever it is, after the attack, specifically by people that call themselves anti-Zionist Jews, that wanted to claim, quoting Zionist sources, that October 7th was a setup, that Netanyahu knew about it, and that Israel, allowed it to happen so they can commit this genocide. I say this with in my heart, bitterness in my heart. These anti-Zionist Jews that repeated this Zionist propaganda have only accepted this and propagated this because they're still in their heart Jewish supremacy. They cannot fathom that a people that are besieged under such limitations and under such unequivocal power can, with all this propaganda about all-seeing Zionists and control of all the internet and surveillance and so forth, they can't perceive in their head that Palestinians in Gaza can outsmart the Zionists and come from the air and land in these spaces. And I tell you a proof of how brilliant the martyr strategists, Laith and Sinwar, are. Look at what happened during the war. Last year, we heard suddenly that there's demonstrations against Hamas inside Gaza. Remember that one? Well, now we know, under the admittance of the Zionists, that this was a theatrical ploy by Hamas. Hamas elite unit made up these demonstrations to move the Israeli prisoners of war from one location to another in the province, and in fact put the Zionist POWs in the front line and made them memorize chants against Hamas, and carried these Israeli soldiers on their shoulders. And the little drones, FPVs that were filming, couldn't recognize their own soldiers. This is the brilliance of the Palestinian people, of the leadership in Gaza. And those that call themselves anti-Zionists that repeat this racist talk about October 7th being allowed to happen by the Zionists need to shut the hell up. October 7th today is the most important date, and we have yet to see the consequences of it, and the world is not going to be the same, will never be the same since October 7th.
I certainly agree with you on all of those points. And there's another reality to it, as ugly as reality can be, and that is, I heard early in the conversation, there was somebody interviewing someone from one of the resistance factions saying, well, but look at all the people you lost, and it is your fault that all these people are dead. And he brought something up, and I'll just bring it up in a different way. They lost 2.5 million people in Vietnam, but they won the war. And in the end, is anybody saying, well, they shouldn't have fought? They should have just let the U.S. empire just take over Vietnam and steal all their resources and subjugate the people. Nobody's saying that. The reality is now the people who the U.S. said could never run Vietnam defeated the U.S. at great cost. And now they control their government and their country, and now they have one of the better growing economies in the world, because they're allowed to control it and they're allowed to enjoy the fruits of their labor to some extent, at least. So when people talk about the losses that happen, the Algerians and the French, I mean, you could go on and on. Every resistance movement ever has taken tremendous losses at the hands of the empire, but in the end, they defeat the empire. And so the losses have been tremendous and regretful and horrible and all of those things true. But 100 years from now, when people look back, just like they did with Vietnam and these others in Algeria and on, they'll say they defeated the empire and cast out the invaders and took the, you know what I mean? In the end, if I get in a fight with someone and we're fighting and the guy punches me and he gets a black eye and he's trying to kill me and I punch him back and he knocks my teeth out and blah, blah. And in the end, this guy's trying to kill me and we fight it out and I win the fight. People are going to look at me. They're going to see that I'm bruised and beaten and everything else, but they're going to say, but he won. In the end, there's no second place. And it appears to me that notwithstanding all the horrific losses, in the end of this war, there's a winner and there's a loser. And on all fronts, economic, Israel's destroyed economically. Public relations, the world despises them. The entire world despises them. Militarily, in all spectrums, the empire has been defeated.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Look, before October 7th, we were steamrolling into, quote unquote, Abraham Accords. The whole West was talking about Palestinians as if they don't exist anymore. And today, Gaza is the #1 issue on domestic and foreign affairs of every country on this planet. How brilliant! How brilliant! Those who have designed this action, and how powerful and giving the Palestinian people are to their own freedom. They are willing to sacrifice such losses, from leadership to children on the ground, to have freedom and liberty. And this, we're still seeing the effects even here, regionally. Look at what happened with this Sharm el-Sheikh, conference with all the Arab and Muslim leaders coming and kissing the ring of Trump. People think in their mind, this is what the propaganda tells us, is like, wow, with all this defeat of the, killing of leadership, of axis of resistance and all these wars and so on, what did you do? Gaza just not only exposed all these Arab and Muslim vassals, for anyone that was fooled still. Okay. It also showed that if Gaza by itself can take on the combined might of the West for 2 years, what the hell are you doing in Egypt, in Saudi, and whatever, that you're worried about losing, taking a beating? If Gaza can withstand this beating and bring the whole empire to its knees, it exposed how little others are willing to sacrifice. And finally, I would say, look at, there's now full generations that will never be Zionist again, okay, in the West. The generation X and Z and Y and whatever. Plus, even the boomers have switched sides. There's no way, ceasefire or not, the more actually there is direct war, the faster the collapse is. But it's over. It's written, and no matter how much Trump tries, or the West, or the vassals in the region try to stop the collapse of the Zionist colony that is foretold, it is happening.
Yeah, and I would look at it like this. In the U.S., I mean, the Charlie Kirk thing, don't underestimate how big that was. For this reason, it exposed something, and that was that no one has any trust for Israel. That when Charlie Kirk was killed, in the court of, I don't care what the government says, in the court of public opinion, everybody's like, the Israelis killed him, or the Zionist donors killed him. All of these people that were 100% pro-Israel. And now you've got Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, two icons of the conservatives, right? The two media icons, and they're both like, Israel's not our friends. They're taking our money. They sound like me. They sound like you and I. You turn on Candace Owens, she's like, the Israelis killed JFK. I mean, there's no, add this. There was hope amongst the imperialists to take out Iran. They attacked Iran. Not only did they get beaten mercilessly, they brought the people of Iran together. They woke the people of Iran up to say, wait a minute, they were telling us to hate our government. We've got to come together with our government so we can fight the invaders. So even the Iranian situation was fixed. There's no hope now for them to overthrow Iran, take Iran, put in their Atlanticist in Iran. That's over. And apparently, from all I understand, Iran is arming itself even more. It's preparing for the next war. Iran is bolder than ever. So the Iranian situation, the resistance is stronger than ever.
Yes, and already also the whole axis of resistance is trying very hard to rearm Gaza. There is also rearming of the West Bank happening right now as we're speaking. And I know probably the biggest visible loss that the axis of resistance had was the loss of Syria as a country. But it may be a blessing right now. It is very, very possible that at any moment right now, there will be armed resistance to the Zionist occupation in Syria. Because remember, the Americans and the Zionists occupied Lebanon in 1970s and 1982, okay? And there was a government in Lebanon that was collaborationist. There was a government in Lebanon from the 40s that was sacrificing some of parts of its own country and its own population to appease the Zionists, and even under those conditions came out the Palestinian resistance, the communist resistance, and eventually the Islamic resistance, Hezbollah, under those conditions. So Syria right now is another situation like that. It's a country that is there's no central government that has real authority. There's multiple occupation forces that are all bickering over the loot. And there is multitudes of layers of ethnicity and sect and language and so forth that makes it impossible for anyone to control under these conditions. Therefore, it is the best condition for the rise of militarized resistance. And the province of Daraa, which is between the Golan Heights and Suwaida in the south, where the biggest population in the south of Syria are, already the leadership of the tribes there are saying they are preparing for an armed resistance and that they are openly in contact with Hezbollah and Iran. This is the province where supposedly the first demonstrations against Assad came out in 2011 in Daraa. Now it is the province that is saying it will be mounting an armed resistance with collaboration with Hamas and Iran. So at any moment, Syria could explode in the face of the Zionists. They are overstretched in Syria. They don't have all the surveillance instituted and so on. And the Golan Heights could become the major fighting zone in a situation of this war continuing on this path.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the taking of Syria, in the short run, they saw it as a prize. In the long run, it'll be a terrible burden because it will cost them. It will be a great, to hold on to it will be great cost. I also think that what happened was a great inspiration to the world. What happened in Gaza, as an example, the United States is threatening Venezuela, and the government of Venezuela has given. They said they've got, I think, 800,000, between 5 and 800,000 now people that are ready to fight. They armed millions in their, basically millions, but they've got 5 to 800,000, I think, and they're militias that are prepared to fight, and they're constantly training more and what have you. They've got millions of people. So I think the Venezuelans are looking at that also, saying, you know, the United States can bomb, and Venezuela does have some military technology they can to defend themselves. They've got to look at Yemen and say, well, if Yemen can do that, we got a lot more than Yemen has, so we can defend ourselves. But I think the people of Venezuela will look to the resistance and say, you know what, let them come in. This country's the size of France and Germany combined. If the imperialists come in here, we'll take care of them. We've seen what happened before. And the U.S. empire has to be looking at Gaza, looking at Venezuela, and that's causing them to hesitate. It is an example of what happens when you go up against determined resistance for the world.
Yeah, I mean, I just saw something about Trump calling the president of Colombia a narco, dealer, Petrov, and so the United States is picking now a fight with Colombia, which is just beside Venezuela. And logically, in my mind, this should bring Venezuela and Colombia together closer, and they should work towards a confederation, changing the colonial borders basically, and making it that it's impossible to break up this region. Maybe retake Panama, which was part of Colombia and cut off by an American invasion. Imagine that, let's say the US actually starts a war with Venezuela. The only worry that I would have for Venezuela is the same worry that I had for Iran or Hezbollah or so on, is make sure your leadership is not an easy target. And when you have a state with ministries and so on, it's easy to track the movements of leaders and so on. So it's an official state. So they need to figure out how to prepare themselves for the possibilities of decapitation attacks. Otherwise, if Venezuela just starts targeting shipping, as Yemen did, going through the Caribbean Sea or the Canal of Panama, I mean, goddamn, the United States economy will be brought down to its knees. Total stoppage of exports and imports. The US will really be in a bad situation. So a lot of these things, it seems like, are not well calculated. And this is why I think the commanding general of Central or Southern Command just resigned. Okay, and in his clear fight between Witkoff, who is ideologically driven, who just wants to dominate and kill and bomb for the hell of bombing, was told by the generals that you start this war, and not only will we be stuck and our ships are going to be sunk, because Venezuela has the surface missiles to sea, that can sink American ships, just like the ones that Yemen has and Hezbollah had, but also that the economy will be in tatters of the United States. So it's almost like the same thing that happened with the Israeli generals and Netanyahu, where 4 different chiefs of staff had to resign over the last 2 years in Israel, because they kept on telling the guy, you can't win this war, stop it, take the exchange that Hamas has offered you. There's not going to be any different military outcome, no matter how long the war is. And so this is where the United States is getting to this point. And that shows you how also, if there is not only a schism within MAGA, but a schism within the military and security apparatuses, that is the beginnings of indicators of possibilities of coups, takedown of government. If it gets worse and worse, and the soldiers find themselves killing their own people, as they are, let's say, beginning to, in the streets of Portland, Chicago, DC, whatever it is, and the economy is going down the drain, and the military strategists are telling the politicians this is not the way, and they're telling them do it anyways, eventually you will have a break point where the military, that is the backbone of any society that keeps a state together, we'll have to choose either the leaders that are breaking the state or save the state with a coup. And this is the direction it's going.
The other part of it is the U.S. is buried in Ukraine. They can't find a way out in Ukraine. The U.S. is buried in the Middle East with both wars that they're buried in two wars that they've already lost. They're running out of, oh my gosh, where are all these balloons? I don't know what that was about. At any rate, let me see if could it be when I did this? Who knows? They are arguing for another war or something. Of course, Venezuela, clearly it's just because they're broke and they want to steal the oil. Tremendous debt problems. Apparently like $7 trillion of this debt comes due that they got to refinance or do something here shortly. They're running on an AI bubble that's going to pop because they did all of this money, all this plans for this AI thing. And as usual, it's not what they thought it was. And it's not going to pan out like it was the be all end all. The United States was going to ride this AI bubble and dominate, and the whole thing's starting to collapse. So there's a gigantic AI bubble. Everything for the US empire that they've touched, everything's going bad. They've lost two wars. I don't really think they can attack Venezuela. And I think this guy probably quit because he probably told him, we can't do this. I won't be in charge of this because we will lose and it'll be on my back and you'll blame me. You know what I mean? It seems to me that the military is saying we can't do this. And one last thing I got to add, and this is my favorite. This is my favorite. China stopped selling us what they call the rare earths that are minerals and metals that are needed to build weapons, which means we can't build weapons unless we get a new deal. And I've said this repeatedly. If I was China, I wouldn't negotiate. I'd say, I'm shutting down your military industrial complex. You don't know how to use your toys, you can't have them. So no, we can negotiate about trade. We can negotiate about everything else. You've built your last F-35. You've built your last missile. You've built your last nuclear sub. What if 10 years from now you're able to get rare earth mineral stuff? Fine, you can start over then. You're threatening me. I will not sell you the things you need to build the missiles to shoot at me. The answer is no. I think China should. I have a feeling that's where China is, that they're like, you people are rampaging the planet. No, game over. I hope that's the case, and I suspect it is, which will shut all of this crap down, which would be great.
Yeah, I mean, China definitely did a smart thing right now. And we look at how over the last 2 to 4 years, they planned to get to this point with nationalizing the whole process of extraction to the final product of these rare earth metals. And maybe they couldn't have done it at the beginning of this genocide, I don't know. But it for sure has direct impact right now on the war continuation in the region, because the United States spent most of its air defense supplies and its bunker buster bombs and F-35s all to defend this Zionist colony, and they cannot spend everything that they have right now if they don't have a supply of rare earth to make up for these weapons being used in the Zionist colony. The other thing is that clearly, if I'm very generous to Russia in my analysis, the way that Russia didn't intervene in the side of the axis of resistance and or fight fully for Syria. If I'm generous with my analysis of what Russia did, I could say Russia wanted the US to spend its time and energy trying to fight an unwinnable war in Gaza, even if it means losing Syria, which is going to be a quagmire for the United States, in order to win its battle in Ukraine. And that, if it had given more weapons to the axis of resistance, maybe the US would have spent more weapons in Ukraine and made the life of Russia harder. Then, point is, in any case, both the actions of Russia and China, whether we want to criticize them or not, or whether I want to criticize them or not, in the end, everything's playing out all because of October 7th. October 7th is what made today China being able even to do what it did with the rare earth metals. Because, if the Palestinians didn't start this war on October 7th, the United States would have been in Taiwan long ago. China wouldn't have had time to fix its supply chain. Similarly for Russia. So October 7th and the Palestinians, this is something that we all should remind ourselves when we talk to Palestinian people, how significant their actions are to all of our lives.
Well, absolutely, because these things all happen together in a way that you couldn't have predicted, and some things are tragic, but all of these things together bogged the empire down in a way that it couldn't fight in all directions, and additionally expose the empire. I think the Iran 12-day war, which again wouldn't have happened if not for October 7th, exposed the empire in a lot of ways. And what it did was also the Iranians were able to, over the course of time here, going back and forth with the Israelis, evaluate the Israelis' defensive systems. And I'm sure that all of which is U.S. defensive and air defense system, which all this information was passed on to allies. So I would imagine what was going on in Ukraine with the Russians, there was information from there and U.S. air defense that went to Iran that allowed Iran to use that to evaluate U.S. air defense systems in the region. You know what I mean? There were things happening that if all of these things hadn't happened as one thing, it wouldn't have had the outcome. But as you said, none of them would have happened if not for October 7th. And once October 7th happened, it was the end of the empire. It was October 7th was an event that will be, I think, reviewed hundreds of years from now as this was it. And not just the beginning of the empire. Empires take 100 years, 200, 300 years to fall. This was falling in 3 years. Internally, oh my gosh. A friend of mine went to China, goes to China, and told me that, when he used to go, you didn't really hear anything about, Gaza or whatever. Now everybody there knows about it. Everybody comments. You ask anybody, it's disgust and the terrible things going on, etc. That in areas of the world where people didn't even have a concept of what was going on, other than something's going on over there, but we got problems of our own.
Yeah, and look, you were mentioning, how this is affecting and forever will be discussed as a seminal moment in human history. We look at the war on Iran, the 12-day war. The United States and Netanyahu wanted to assassinate the Ayatollah Khamenei, Khamenei. And although Russia gave up President Assad, and Russia sat and watched as Nasrallah was assassinated, and Sinwar and Haniyeh and others were assassinated, leaders within the Axis of Resistance. When the time came for the Zionists to assassinate the Ayatollah, President Putin lifted a phone directly to President Trump and told him that if this happens, there will be a world war. There will be a civilizational war and there will be blood in the streets of Western capitals that is uncontrollable, that you cannot even prepare for. There will be a Shia, a Muslim, anywhere that decides to just slaughter some symbols of those who killed the Ayatollah. So this again, this idea of assassinating leaders like this, and the raising of the stature of even the Ayatollah himself to become a symbol in all of the Muslim world, whether Shia or Sunni, becoming the top after the assassinations of others, okay, as a symbolic person for resistance. This again is an effect of October 7th, and President Putin making that call, it wouldn't have happened. He wouldn't have cared if the Ayatollah is assassinated or not, if it wasn't for October 7th. October 7th set the stage for the possibility of a world war. And President Putin, with all the criticisms that I may have for things that happened in Syria, it's clear that he kind of connected the future of Russia to the survival of the Ayatollah.
I'll say this. 20 years from now, and I believe, it could be wrong, I believe we're going to get through this. 20 years from now, when people look at the politics in the West, the government of the United States, the governments in France and Germany and the West and in Italy and these countries where the people are furious, where the people who try to oppose Zionism are, struck down and arrested, etc. When they look at the governments, they'll say, wow, that was all October 7th. The governments of the West will be changed. The governments of the West will be significantly redirected. Because, right now, you just got, what have we had? We've had a bunch of people in the United States that run around, I love Israel, anything for Israel, Zionism is today, tomorrow, Zionism forever, etc. Right? That was what they would say. They can't say that. And a lot of them are going to lose. I have a friend right now I need to get him on. He's Richie Torres, who is this, Zionist, and he plays the usual, I'm gay, I'm Latino, I'm all this bull crap that he's got, and I'm a, hardcore Zionist. He's horrified because Jose Vega is going to primary him, and he's horrified. And we've got, and Axios, I think, had an article with all of these people who are primarying all these Democrats, and the discussion with all of them was Zionism, Israel, etc. A lot of these people are going to lose. The government, the October 7th, the Palestinians will have changed governments throughout the world.
Oh yes, and all of this should make any of us that are depressed rightly hurt emotionally for seeing all these innocents being killed. All of the things that we just said should help you uplift the spirit and understand the bigger picture and realize where we're going. Look at what's happening in the UK right now. There's Maccabi Tel Aviv, one of the Zionist soccer teams, football teams, is supposed to be playing in the European League against Aston Villa from Birmingham in the UK. And the last time this Maccabi Tel Aviv played in a European city was last year, if you remember, in Amsterdam, and there was all those hooligans beating local Dutch people and riots in the streets and so forth. So the police of Birmingham, the UK police, banned the arrival of Maccabi fans to the UK and/or the stadium. And now you have the whole elite of the UK attacking the police of the UK, calling their action anti-Semitic. The police, thinking about how to protect the city and the citizens of the city, are anti-Semitic for not letting the Maccabi Tel Aviv hooligans come down and destroy the city. Okay, this is anti-Semitic. But at the same time, there was a huge campaign to ban the Zionist colony from FIFA, from the Football Federation of the world, and ban them from qualifiers for the World Cup. And it almost happened. And then Trump pulled the phone and threatened FIFA, because the US is holding the World Cup next year, by the way. Is going to be held in the UK, in the US, Canada, and Mexico, the World Cup. And suddenly FIFA refused to ban the Zionist colony. And the next 2 days later, the head of FIFA was at Sharm el-Sheikh summit. Why would the head of FIFA be there to kiss the finger of Trump, the ring of Trump? Except that, FIFA is very corrupt. So maybe the US gave the guy a few $1 million in his pocket, and then he came to take the bag home with him, delivered to him. And but all of this are indications of how the elite are cannibalizing themselves. The schisms are unrepairable. There is no going back for, and all of this is thanks to the ingenious planning of October 7th and the sacrifices that the Palestinian people were willing to give to get to their liberation.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think what we're hitting on is the expansive nature of the effects that are incalculable. It's incalculable. And there's an old saying, it's not what happens to you, it's how you respond to what happens to you that determines your path and your future. And the response of the empire is really what's driving this. I've heard discussions online of people saying, the US was and the West were like, yeah, we did terrible things, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, in the past, 25, 30, 40 years ago, but it's all different now. And what is exposed, you hear people saying now, what are they talking about? They're literally talking about what happened to the Native Americans, what happened in Australia by the British to the, Australian indigenous people, slavery. They're looking at it, and people are saying the ruling elite of the US and the UK and these empires, their history is horrific. Oh my God, they haven't changed. So even their ability to put their evil deeds for hundreds of years behind them, it's gone. It's over. People are looking at them saying, you are who you've always been. And I think that may be the most devastating blow.
Oh yes. Like you see Tommy Robinson in the UK and all these other crazies saying, oh, this pro-Palestine crowd, they don't acknowledge the right of Australia, New Zealand, or Canada, or the US to exist the way it is. And you're like, wow, they're scared of it. For a while, they thought that the indigenous liberation in Canada, in Australia, in the United States it's never going to happen. It's done. But now there's actual whole generations of people that are saying, hey, what's happening to the Palestinians is what happened to the indigenous peoples in the Americas and Oceania. And if we can correct the wrong that happened to the Palestinian people, we definitely can correct it also to what happened to the indigenous peoples in the Americas and Oceania. And that the main problem that keeps us repeating in this pattern of wars that the West is causing is supremacy. And we need to extract that idea of manifest destiny or chosen people and end that. We can have a just society in the United States or Canada without it being a supremacist society. You can have economic benefits and a good economy and a good stature in the world without being a genocidal regime like Australia, who's killing the indigenous peoples there. You can share the wealth of Australia with these indigenous people and uplift them and put them in the front and give them a better future and not end Australia. So there is now a new generation that is looking back to 400 years, not only to World War II, not only to the Nakba of the Palestinians, they're looking back to 400, 600 years and seeing this record of genocide after genocide, and how can we correct this path of humanity? all because of the awakening that October 7th caused.
One last thing that I did want to get your comment on, and that is the other thing that it has done that, again, I don't know which is the most important. They're all important. It is isolated the ruling elite in the West. You know, the people in the West, you know, I guess wouldn't want to feel you guys are monsters or you guys are bad people or whatever the case may be. But everybody's looking at it now and they're saying, well, wait a minute. The people in most of these Western countries are saying, we don't like genocide. We don't want this. And the Western leaders say, we'll treat you the same way we're treating the Palestinians or anybody else. You're nothing to us, to their own people. We're not going to listen to you. We don't care. We'll send our goons with clubs to beat you, arrest you, take your any hope of free speech. You don't have free speech. Shut up. So what it has done is it has exposed and isolated the ruling elite in the West, so that the people in other parts of the country, of the world, can look at the West and say, well, geez, the people of the West are not with their ruling elite. I'm not saying they're perfect, they're good or bad, but they're not down with their ruling elite. They just kind of want to survive and have their lives, their own lives. And the ruling elite is trying to put the iron fist down on everyone. So the ruling elite in the West now are saying, we're at war with the Russians, so they're isolated. We're at war with all of BRICS, the Chinese, India, everyone. We're at war with all of them. They won't listen to us. The Muslims and the resistance, well, certainly we're at war with them, and we're at war with our own people. We've got to take over the TV channels and the news and the
Social
you know,
media
the
platforms.
TikToks and the social media. We've got to take over everything to suppress our own people. What October 7th did was it completely, absolutely, and irreparably isolated the vicious ruling elite class in the West once and for all.
Oh yes, and I think because of how vocal the population in the West has been in its oppositions to the actions of its elite, it lifted off any possibility of animosity between peoples, right? And it's very important that our viewers in the West understand that there's all of us in the rest of the world now clearly see that there's a difference between the elite and the people. And me, as a Canadian citizen and married to an American citizen, and I have always known that the vast majority of peoples, no matter what culture they come from or what state they belong to as citizens, are decent human beings. You know, most people want to help their neighbor. Most people want to protect women in their neighborhood. Most people want to take care of children and provide them with education so they can raise up to. Most people would not want to dirty their own water, or throw garbage in their own street. So it's clear right now that there is a human consciousness that is much more cohesive on a global level, thanks to the resistance in Gaza and how it awakened the resistance and goodness in any human being on this planet that was trying to just go on with their day to feed their children and hide from pressure from the governments or elites that are corrupt, and now realizes that they need to stand up for their own good, not only for the good of Gaza. To change the society and better the future of their own children, they need to stand up against their vicious elite that are not representative of them and their goodwill.
Well, now we're going to show you the website that you need to go to stay up on all the information, and it is freepalestine.video. That you'll see it's FPTV, Free Palestine TV, but the way to get there is freepalestine.video, and you notice there we got field reports, military operations, latest episodes, and of course you can donate. You can choose your amount there. You can help fund, and you can do a one-time, or if you can, You can do it monthly. Even if you can only do, you know, a small amount, you can enter a custom amount, whatever you can, but it'd be great if you could do monthly. You can see there, you know, great video, great work done by Laith. They're, you know, going out into dangerous areas. They're facing threats of the very violent and vicious Zionists, but they're, you know, facing them with bravery and doing the finest work that we could ever ask. So everybody who can, if you can afford it, make sure you go to freepalestine.video and you donate. And in addition, just capture the little freepalestine.video URL and share it on all your social media links. And everybody needs to do that, because right now, I don't know if you've been paying attention to Twitter and all of that. I mean, the algorithms against anyone who's anti-Zionist are beyond belief. But if everybody shares them, then of course it will make it hard for them to get them out with the algorithms. And when you share freepalestine.video, make sure you put a little note to people, encouraging people to donate. Thank you very much, everyone. And you see all my stuff sliding across the bottom, and there's my PO box in case you want to mail, send a mail. Thank you very much. Laith, thank you very much, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Garland. See you next week.
All right, everybody.